I think that if you observe what happens to many young people in the African community right now, is that many of them are literally raising themselves. The formal social organization, formal involvement in churches and organizations that take sustained periods of time, led by knowledgeable senior adults, to tell people what they need to know, to provide them with a value system, to give them legitimation and so forth. The tightness of the structure that makes that happen has weakened considerably. And so what you see is children that are basically raising children, and that's unfortunate. But every group should have that structure to socialize its children.
So again, I asked you the question, let me restate it. Where did we lose it, and how did we lose it? Because it was there before. Everybody, Dr. Akbar, everybody tells the story of Miss Mary down the street who could whoop you, and you got another whipping when you got home. We had that. People in our generation certainly had it. Where did we lose it? Within one generation?
Well, it's been clear that it's been under siege ever since we've been here. I mean, like and what we had in many ways was an adaptation to conditions that were constantly threatening the lives of our families. And because we were clear about our shared oppression, if you will, I mean, we were forced into a cage where we had no doubt that our condition was one that was undesirable. We wanted to get out of that cage. Once this desegregation came along, once we began to get this illusion of freedom because we were now able to live in other people's reality, then we began to give up the perception, the shared perception that we had a shared kind of threat going on. And as a result of that, we lost a lot of the adaptive things that kept us surviving. So I think that began to deteriorate those forces that work to preserve the integrity of how we raised our children, preserved our families.
You also have to realize that there are things that are done to us that weaken our capacity to sustain our institutions.
Such as?
Job discrimination, the decline of educational opportunities, Hollywood propaganda, negative images about African people.
Okay, let's try to look at some of those. And you, Dr. Akbar, you mentioned one, the illusion of inclusion. Some of us have made it, so to speak. We have nice homes, nice cars, and are taking care of our families. We don't share that problem with other people, and if you just work a little harder, it could happen to you too. What do you think?
Well, I think that's it. I really believe that there's been a tremendous push to confuse inclusion with actual power. In other words, we confuse presence with power. And therefore, we've willingly exchanged the opportunity to be in the presence of powerful people for real aspiration to power. So once upon a time, we wanted to have our own business in our own communities. Once upon a time, we had a commitment to building colleges that reflected the unique perspectives that we had on reality. But once we were given access to be in the presence of those who had real power, we gave up our own, seeing theirs as being more legitimate.
Both of you have mentioned education or educational institutions. How have they, and I've heard educators talk about how they are destroying our youth today. How have they done that, or do you agree that they have?
Well, educational institutions are having a difficult time educating all the children, but especially for us. And for example, one of the things that's happened in the last 12 to 15 years, 1980, 12% of the teaching force in this country was African.
Do you think that's done on purpose? Is that by intent?
Well, it's a combination of things. Some of it by intent, some of it by the structure of the institutions. For example, if you use the National Teachers Examination as a selection device for teachers, you will pick people who can score high and can't teach. And you will eliminate people who can and have been teaching who don't score high.
Okay, you raise.
So what do you call that? Intentional or non-intentional?
You raise a critical issue in test taking. How do you determine somebody's going to do well on a job, be it a teacher, a paramedic, a police officer, or anything else, if you don't have some bar of measurement? And how do we determine what bar of measurement is fair, Dr. Akbar?
Well, I think the best bar of measure is prior performance. I mean, that is clearly the best predictor of future performance is prior performance. So, for an example, it has clearly been demonstrated by all kinds of tests that people have done that the best predictor of student performance in college is high school performance of those students. Like how well they've done. Have they gone to class? Have they attended to doing their studies? And how they have performed is the best indicator. However, the tests are really one of the poorer indicators. But because the people who control the test also control the gateway, they use the test as a means to affirm the decisions they've already made. So there's a kind of like a predetermined selectivity that they simply use the test as a means of labeling to keep out rather than to include.
Yet and still, let's say that all of that is true, and I do believe you. How do you determine if a person is going to be a good police officer or a good paramedic if they have no prior determination in that field?
Well, I think that one of the things you do is require them to have some prior determination in terms of activity related to that. What has been their relationships with people prior to that time? So how have they dealt with authority positions? I'm sorry.
I just testified in a Supreme Court case for police, sergeant's exam in New York City. And it was very interesting to me that you usually get more interest in paper and pencil tests when you get more black applicants. Prior to that, people are much more lackadaisical about what tests mean and what they do. But one of the things that I asked was that if you wanted to find out whether these were really good tests or not, let's give the test to the people who are holding the jobs now, and let's find out how that compares to their performance ratings.
And what was the answer to that?
Well, they didn't think they wanted to do that.
I wonder why.
You see, I mean, there's a lot of common sense things that let you know that what Dr. Akbar said is that testing is more of a gatekeeping function. It's not a quality control device for guaranteeing quality. Well, it looks as if on the face of it, it looks to be that way, but it isn't.
Well, it sounds like we need to revamp what we think of education. There used to be things that were called apprenticeships. If you were going to become a shoemaker, you worked at the feet of someone who was an expert at it, and they taught you, and you knew if you had an aptitude for it or not. Could we not return to those things for police officers, for doctors, lawyers, whatever?
Most people are looking for something quick, dirty, and cheap. And so a paper and pencil test is quick and dirty. It's a statement about how much the society is willing to invest in developing and in assessing talent. What you call for an apprenticeship is labor intensive. People would much prefer to be able to make a decision in a 15-minute span, based on a 15-minute or an hour test, than to take a 3-week or 4-week internship. So what you're really looking for is a quick way to make a dirty decision.